From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Welcome back, folks. You know, Bibi Netanyahu gave a stirring, strong speech. We win, they lose. But I don't think he's getting any backup on that. And I want him to clean out Hamas before this is over. I don't think he's getting any backup on that. So let's talk to Ambassador John Bolton, longtime friend of mine, former National Security Advisor and UN Ambassador, and now Chairman of the Foundation for American Security and Freedom. And John's book was The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir. John, you know, the difference between good and evil, okay, we win, they lose, that's a Reagan-esque kind of statement. I mean, whatever happened to let's clean out Hamas altogether? I didn't hear anything like that from Biden. I didn't hear anything like that from Harris. And actually, our old boss, I didn't hear it really from him either. So what do you make of this?
Well, I thought Netanyahu really did give a Reaganite kind of speech. He explained what Israel was up to. He cut through the Hamas-Iran propaganda about what's going on in Gaza. And he made it very clear, as Ronald Reagan always did, that the only acceptable outcome is to end the threat against the state of Israel. And by the way, threats basically propped up by Iran, who is also a threat to us. So, I think 35 or more Democrats boycotted the speech. I just think that's bad manners. But the Republicans who showed up gave him a warm response. Then he had to go meet, as you say, with Biden and Harris. I think the Biden meeting was more pressure on Israel to accept this ceasefire to get hostages out. Everybody wants the hostages out, but what Hamas really wants is relief from getting pounded by Israel. And I think to get it off the TV screens before the election, when Biden was a candidate now for Harris, she made it pretty clear by her demeanor in public with Netanyahu and by some of her remarks after the meeting was over. I really think there's a break in the Democratic Party. I think Harry Truman's going to be turning in his grave. This is the president who was made America the first country to recognize the independence of Israel, would not recognize the Kamala Harris campaign. So this could be a big turning point. I think it's bad news for Israel. And, President Trump was interested in talking about his record from the first term, but he made it clear he wanted the war wrapped up, too, because he thought Israel was getting bad publicity. And it is. Israel is being outdone by Iran and Hamas in the propaganda department, which is stunning when you think about it. They got a lot of help in this country. What they need to do is eliminate the Hamas threat. Israel, innocent civilians will not be safe while there's still a terrorist group on their border.
Right. Eliminate Hamas threat. I'm for that. The phrase de-Hamasification, as in denazification after World War II. The trouble, John, is I looked at these meetings and tried to parse through it. It just doesn't seem like anybody is for wiping out Hamas. I mean, for example, what do you know about this ceasefire deal with hostages? I mean, it sounds like the Bidens and Harris want a permanent ceasefire. I mean, they want the war to end and somehow hostages to come home. We don't know which hostages are still alive, tragically, including the American hostages. I don't think anybody knows that right now. And I don't see support for Israel to essentially finish the job and crush Hamas.
Well, I think you're exactly right on the hostages. It's a tragic situation, but I think Hamas has been lying for months on how many they still have alive. And I think it was use anything they could get to get a ceasefire and get relief from the military pressure Israel was applying. And I think the reason Israel has been strung along on these negotiations is the unbelievable, unprecedented pressure from the Biden White House. Israel's got plenty other things to worry about. Hezbollah in the north, the direct threat from Iran and its increasing nuclear weapons program. Harris said, one of her remarks to the press was, let's get this deal done and end the war and get the hostages back.
Right.
If, come on, just sit down and sign the deal. Nobody had objection in this country, at least nobody of any of any quality when Franklin Roosevelt said our terms for Germany and Japan in World War II were unconditional surrender. That's what we insisted upon. What is wrong with Israel faced with the barbarity of Hamas asking for the same thing? Would Kamala Harris have stood up to Franklin Roosevelt and said, come on, let's get a deal done here and end this war? I would have liked to have seen her done it.
That's a great point. Unconditional surrender. I mean, that's right, but I don't see any support for it. And John, when the word ceasefire, is Biden and or Harris talking about a permanent ceasefire? In other words, stop the war altogether without, finally crushing Hamas?
I think increasingly that's what it does mean. I mean, the negotiations were hung up for a long time with Israel saying, look, we'll have a 2-week or 3-week ceasefire. We get back a certain number of hostages, and then we're back to fighting. Hamas from the beginning has said ceasefire means end of war, Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, which is obviously unacceptable. As I understand the latest iteration of the deal, and I may well not because it's been withheld from the public so far, but there's a ceasefire of about 6 weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks to exchange hostages. Then the ceasefire continues while negotiations on a final deal continue. That's made in heaven for Hamas. I don't understand why Israel would even consider that.
John Bolton, what would a Kamala Harris administration foreign policy look like?
Well, she has so little experience in foreign policy, it could be almost anything. But let's face it, she's a Democrat from California. Let's never forget Jeane Kirkpatrick's famous phrase from her wonderful speech at the 1984 Republican convention in support of Ronald Reagan's renomination, when she talked about the San Francisco Democrats who always blame America first.
Right.
I mean, it was a wonderful phrase then, and I think you can probably apply it to Kamala Harris in toto. I would be very worried. It would be like the Biden administration, except potentially much worse than Obama.
I mean, let's stay in the Mideast for a second. The Bidens, I could have said the Obamas, but the Bidens themselves relaxed all the sanctions on Iran, allowed them to produce oil and sell oil, principally to China, get their foreign exchange reserves back up towards $100 billion, and finance the war, the Hamas war against Israel and Hezbollah and so forth and Houthis. I mean, is Kamala Harris going to change any of that, or is she going to coddle Iran too?
I think she'll do exactly what the Biden people are doing, or worse. And let's look at the Houthis in Yemen, equipped, armed, trained, financed by Iran. They wouldn't have two rocks to rub together if Iran weren't giving them missiles and drones. They have shut down the Suez Canal, Red Sea shipping passage through which an incredible amount of the world's oil and gas and other cargo had been shipped for years. This is a fundamental violation of a principle of American foreign policy that goes back to the revolution, freedom of the seas. And what are we doing about it? What the Air Force used to call tank plinking. Every once in a while, we shoot one of their radars, we attack one of the Houthi launching sites. We ought to clean that out. We ought to destroy the supply coming from Iran. We ought to say we do not accept anybody closing that passage for any reason whatever. And we ought to get a coalition of our friends to do it and show we're just simply not going to accept it.
But you don't expect that from a Harris administration.
No, definitely not. I think this is a demonstration of the Democratic Party, something we've known for a long time. It simply doesn't have a functioning national security wing anymore. I worry about the rising tide of isolationism in the Republican Party because if we succumb to that, then there's no major political party that has national security as a top priority, and that means we're in trouble.
Yeah. All right. Amen to that. Folks, that was Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. National Security Advisor, and John's book, The Room Where It Happened, a White House Memoir. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Take a quick break. On the other side of the break, Miranda Devine of the New York Post is going to talk about the evils of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
Larry Kudlow.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.